The chime of the showroom door cut through the heavy silence. Brandon Ellis strode in, his polished leather shoes striking firm echoes against the white marble floor. His sharp gaze swept over the showroom's opulence before settling on a troubling sight. His mother, Margaret Ellis, standing motionless, facing the condescending glare of the receptionist, Lindsay Carter. Brandon's hand clenched into a fist, his eyes narrowing. With a determined air, he walked toward his mother, each step resonating with an unspoken challenge to anyone who dared stand in his way. The room grew so silent that even a breath felt loud. "Mom, what's going on here?" Brandon asked in a low, steady voice, each word cutting through the tension like a cold wind slicing through the room. This powerful opening merely ignites a sequence of deeply emotional events and profound lessons. Are you curious to see how Brandon will stand up for his mother? Hit subscribe to follow this story full of unexpected turns. October 10th, 2024, at a renowned showroom in downtown New York City, Margaret Ellis, an older black woman, stepped through the gleaming glass doors of the Rolls-Royce dealership. The November sky was overcast, and a biting wind heralded the coming winter. Margaret wore a worn-out coat, her shoes scuffed from years of use, her calloused hands trembling slightly, but her eyes were resolute. After years of endurance, today marked her pursuit of a dream she had never dared to imagine. Margaret, a retired veteran who served 30 years in the military, had endured countless challenges. Living humbly after her service, she never sought luxury. But this time, her son, Brandon Ellis, a successful millionaire, had convinced her to indulge in a well-deserved gift. A Rolls-Royce was not merely a symbol of extravagance, but a testament to her triumph over life's hardships. Inside the showroom, everything sparkled like treasure. Bright lights reflected off the pristine marble floors, and the luxurious cars were displayed like masterpieces of art. As Margaret stepped in, a wave of warmth washed over her, a stark contrast to the chill outside. Behind the reception desk stood Lindsay Carter, a young blonde woman with neatly tied hair, impeccably dressed. "In designer attire." She looked up, her gaze locking onto the newcomer. As Margaret entered, Lindsay's scrutinizing eyes seemed to strip her from head to toe. Every frayed edge of Margaret's coat, every scuff on her shoes, was subjected to judgment. The professional smile Lindsay wore quickly faded, replaced with a cold, disdainful expression. Margaret offered a polite nod and said in a calm but firm voice, "Good morning. I'd like to see a Rolls-Royce Phantom." Lindsay's eyes narrowed as a smirk curled her lips. Her reply was syrupy yet laced with derision. "Ma'am, I think these cars might be beyond your financial reach." Margaret's brow furrowed slightly, but her composure remained steady. "I've done my research and know exactly what I'm looking for," she said. Lindsay let out a short, cutting laugh, the sound as sharp as a blade to Margaret's dignity. "Excuse me, but this showroom isn't for sightseeing. We cater only to serious buyers, and clearly you're not one of them." Margaret, feeling the sting of Lindsay's words, maintained her calm demeanor and replied, "I am a serious buyer. I'd like to see the car, and I can afford it." The smirk faded from Lindsay's face. She leaned over the desk, her voice low but dripping with condescension. "Take a good look at yourself. Are you sure you're in the right place? Rolls-Royce isn't for people like you." The words "people like you" hung in the air, heavy with implication. Lindsay's eyes gleamed with overt disdain. Taking a deep breath to steady herself, Margaret responded quietly, "My son is Brandon Ellis, CEO of Ellis Ventures. I'm here to purchase a car with his assistance." At the mention of Brandon Ellis, Lindsay hesitated briefly, but her arrogance quickly returned. "Oh, really? You know Brandon Ellis? Anyone can drop a name. But I doubt Mr. Ellis has any connection to you." She emphasized the last word, folding her arms with a dismissive shake of her head. "I think you should leave before wasting any more of our time. Honestly, you're not the kind of customer we cater to." Lindsay raised her voice, ensuring the other customers in the showroom could hear. A few turned their heads, their expressions a mix of curiosity and discomfort. Unfazed, Lindsay continued. If you don't leave, I'll have to call security. Despite the tension thickening the air, Margaret stood firm. Though her heart ached from the cruel words, her demeanor remained composed. Before Lindsay could escalate further, the sound of the glass door chime broke the tense silence. A man strode in, the sharp clicks of his polished leather shoes echoing against the marble floor. It was Brandon Ellis, a tall, imposing figure clad in a tailored navy blue suit. His presence exuded authority and power, drawing every eye in the showroom. His gaze swept across the room and quickly settled on his mother, standing motionless under Lindsay's scornful glare. Brandon's jaw clenched, and his piercing eyes darkened with fury. Striding purposefully toward Margaret, Brandon's every step resonated with unspoken defiance. Conversations among the wealthy patrons ceased, replaced by murmurs and wide-eyed stares. Reaching his mother, Brandon gently placed a hand on her shoulder. His voice, though steady, was laced with a quiet intensity. "Mom, what's going on here?" Margaret, though composed, could not conceal the weariness in her tone. "They don't believe I'm here to buy a car, Brandon. The receptionist said I don't belong here." Brandon's gaze snapped to Lindsay, who froze under the weight of his glare. The confidence she had moments ago dissolved into visible unease. She opened her mouth to speak, but Brandon's cold, commanding voice cut through. "Did you just tell my mother she doesn't belong here?" Lindsay stammered, her face pale. I didn't mean it that way. I just wasn't sure." Brandon raised his hand, signaling her to be silent. His voice deepened, sharp and full of authority. "Uncertain about what?" "Uncertain that my mother, a veteran who has sacrificed her entire life for this country, can walk into this showroom." At that moment, the showroom manager, David Marshall, stepped out from the office behind him, his face striving to maintain composure. He quickly recognized the gravity of the situation and attempted to intervene. "Mr. Ellis," he began hesitantly, "I believe there might be a misunderstanding here. We highly value our customers and—" Brandon spun around, his cold gaze causing David to pause. "A misunderstanding? No, this isn't a misunderstanding. This is blatant arrogance and discrimination in what you call premium customer service." He pointed towards Lindsay, who was visibly trembling. "Your employee looked at my mother and decided, based solely on her appearance, that she wasn't worthy of being served. This isn't a misunderstanding, Mr. Marshall. This is discrimination." David, now starting to break out in a cold sweat, tried to defend himself. "Mr. Ellis, I assure you that this behavior does not reflect the culture of our showroom. Lindsay is still young and—" Brandon interrupted, his voice like a dagger. "Don't insult my intelligence by blaming inexperience. This is a systemic issue, starting with you." Turning to his mother, his tone softened but remained resolute. "Mom, we don't need this car from these people. They aren't deserving." However, Margaret, who had remained silent all along, now stood tall. Her voice was warm, strong, yet filled with determination. "Brandon, thank you, but I didn't come here to be pushed out. I came to buy a car, and I won't leave until they see who I am." Her words silenced the entire showroom. Even Brandon couldn't help but feel proud as he looked at his mother. Realizing the awkwardness of the situation, David hurriedly forced a strained smile. "Of course, Mrs. Ellis. Please allow me to personally introduce you to our finest models." But Margaret raised her hand, cutting him off, her gaze firmly fixed on Lindsay. "No, I want her to do that." Lindsay, her face flushed, cast a pleading glance towards David, but received no assistance. Eventually, she had to step away from the desk, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes, please follow me this way." As Margaret and Lindsay walked towards the display area, Brandon remained standing, his eyes sweeping over all the staff and the attentive customers watching intently. His voice was cold, yet echoed throughout the room. "This isn't over." Margaret walked slowly alongside Lindsay through the display area, where the gleaming Rolls-Royce cars stood like works of art. Lindsay's awkward posture was evident, her eyes constantly avoiding Margaret's gaze. "Here is our latest phantom model, ma'am," Lindsay said, her voice trembling, pointing towards the sleek black car in front of her. Margaret approached, gently touching the shiny body of the car. Her gaze wasn't solely focused on the vehicle but more on her own experience. After a moment of silence, she spoke, her voice calm yet meaningful. "You know, these cars symbolize success, power, and prestige. But if you judge people solely by their appearance, all this beauty is meaningless." Lindsay didn't respond, her face burning with shame. In the distance, Brandon continued to watch, his cold eyes betraying a hint of pride as he saw his mother leading the conversation with grace and dignity. David Marshall, now standing near the display area, attempted to salvage the situation. "Mrs. Ellis, we sincerely apologize for the unpleasant experience you've had. To express our regret, we would like to offer you a special discount on your purchase." Margaret turned to look at him, her eyes sharp yet composed. "I don't need a discount. I just need to be respected as a human being, as a customer. If you think a discount can erase the way you've treated me, you're mistaken." Margaret's words left David confused, while Lindsay bowed her head further in embarrassment. Unexpectedly, Margaret turned to Brandon. "Brandon, you were right. We don't need to buy a car from people who don't know how to treat customers with kindness. Let's go." Brandon smiled, nodding. He gently placed his hand on his mother's back, guiding her towards the exit. But before leaving, he paused, turning to both David and Lindsay. His voice rang out, each word clear. "Your brand isn't defined by the cars you sell, but by how you treat people. Today, you've lost more than just a customer. You've lost your dignity." After Brandon and his mother left the showroom, the atmosphere fell silent. Some customers quietly left, clearly dissatisfied with the staff's behavior. Lindsay stood motionless, while David sighed, realizing the severity of the situation. The next day, a news article went viral on social media, recounting Margaret's story and how she was treated at the showroom. The story quickly amassed millions of shares, with comments expressing outrage and condemning the discriminatory behavior. The showroom had to issue a public apology, but their reputation was severely damaged. Lindsay was fired, and David was reassigned to another department. As for Margaret and Brandon, they decided to purchase the Rolls-Royce from a different dealership, where they were welcomed and served with genuine respect. Margaret, in her new car, smiled at her son. "Son, today's lesson wasn't for me. It was for people like them, who don't understand that a person's value isn't based on their appearance." Brandon replied with a smile, "That's right, Mom, but I believe this story will help many others rethink how they treat people." Margaret's story wasn't just about buying a car. It was a profound lesson on respect and fairness. It's not about appearances or backgrounds, but about kindness and how we treat others that truly defines a person's worth. If you found yourself in Margaret or Brandon's situation, what would you do? Have you ever stood up to protect yourself or a loved one against injustice? Share your story in the comments section. Your voice can inspire and change how people perceive fairness and respect. Thank you for supporting the channel. Please like, share, and subscribe to receive the latest updates. These stories are compiled from various sources and do not represent any individual or organization. They are shared to promote human values in life and have been rewritten with the assistance of AI. If there are any inaccuracies, please overlook them with understanding. Wishing you all the best in life.